Hey, we're back at it with another lens review. This time we're going to do a quick look, review, and cinematic for the Samyang 85mm F1.4. It's actually what camera number 2, the XH1, is filming on right now. Camera A is on the much wider per gear 25mm F1.8, which we reviewed in the last video. I'm only about maybe 3 feet away from that camera, whereas the Samyang at 85mm, we have to put it much further away, making it about 127mm equivalent for full frame. And that's closer to about maybe 7.5 feet. It weighs about 1 pound and it feels pretty sturdy and well built. Let's start with a quick background as to why I got that lens and the primary reasons I own it. So aside from making these online YouTube videos, I also do a lot of client-related projects, including interviews, commercials, and weddings. The 85 works really well for a lot of those kinds of videos, especially when it's static and on a tripod like it is right now. If you're interested in learning more about the lens or checking out the best prices, you can use the link down below, which does help out the channel. Super awesome if you do. There's kind of 3 main reasons I got that. It's telephoto, it's really good in low light, and it creates great depth of field, all for a really low price at about $260 new. And I actually picked this up a few months ago used for about $150. It's probably going to be really hard to find it for that low. I think I got really lucky as far as an open box deal on Amazon. That's not to say you won't find another deal like that in the future. But even at $250, I think it's a pretty good deal considering the image quality you get out of it, as well as, like we were saying, it being a telephoto and having that really shallow depth of field. Before we get into more details about the lens and I share why I primarily got it, let's look at a quick B-roll cinematic showing you the kind of results you can get with this outdoors run and gun style shooting. Let's check it out. Like a lot of my videos, all those shots were done handheld. Compared to the last cinematic I did using the 25mm, they were all done in 4K 24 FPS, meaning we couldn't really rely on the slow motion to stabilize our jittery movements being handheld and these manual lenses not being stabilized. I really was pushing this lens past its normal application in that it wasn't on a tripod and that you normally wouldn't expect good results hand holding this, manual focusing and panning. But similar to the other manual lenses I've reviewed, having IBIS is a big game changer, and without it, I mean, most if not all those other shots I took would really not be usable unless I was staying really steady. Compared to other lenses in my still #1 pick all-around lens, the 18 to 135mm, in which I keep trying to drive home the point. It's really awesome because of its versatility of going from 18 to 135 all in one lens and not having to switch it out. It falls short compared to that 85mm in that when you zoom it in to about 80, the f-stop is going to probably be at least f5, whereas the Samyang will be f1.4, meaning this is not going to be nearly as good in low light and you're not going to be getting that same level of depth of field for it. Primarily, it's targeted for people who are trying to do portraiture and telephoto applications. So very in line with those other video client projects I was talking about, where you can get it on a static tripod and your filming conditions are either controlled, staged, or predictable. And while I have other lenses now that are also good in low light and create nice depth of field, I wanted a telephoto version of those, and I didn't mind it being manual because I was primarily thinking, well, weddings, there are a lot of times where you as the videographer, or even as a photographer, if you're a photographer, you're gonna have to stand further away from the bride and groom, especially during the ceremony, and you're gonna wanna get a nice close-up shot of them, and you're gonna wanna have that really beautiful artistic look. And because you can't physically get closer to them and get a similar look with, say, like a 35 or the 25 that this is, it's gonna be very beneficial to have that 85 on it. I do have two other telephoto lenses, one being the 18 to 35 we just talked about, as well as the 50 to 230, which I've done previous cinematics with. Again, the downsides to those and why I wanted to add this to the arsenal is that f1.4 and it being really good in low light. So what's good? What do I like about this lens? It's been really exciting picking up all these manual lenses over the past couple months. It encourages you to be more in control and aware of what you're shooting. What settings do I have to dial in both on my lens and on my camera to acquire or to achieve that shot? Especially when you have your lens and camera in autofocus, you don't really have as much of that control and you're kind of relying on the camera to know that you want this in focus, which works well again for certain cameras, but the downside being is if you are tracking a subject or you want to slowly, gradually focus in on an object, the camera doesn't really know what you're trying to do. I think it's really good at making the mundane things like you see in the various shots I've done around the house here look way nicer. Like it just brings the f1.4 similar to this was f1.8, and I was saying how you can just like kind of pinpoint details and get really focused in on them. But because this is more narrow in terms of its field of view, those details are heightened even more because it is the sole thing in focus. So for example, the water faucet, whatever it is, everything else is blurred out. The 85 is when you just really want to focus in on that subject without much else. And while I'm primarily a videographer, it's a fun but limiting lens in that you have to be really mindful of the distances between yourself and the subject. There is that minimum focusing distance of 3 feet, which means it can't really be the one lens that you take or use for either a shoot or even just like an outdoor trip for the most part. While this is a good all-around lens, that is perfect for a specific use. Overall, it seems pretty sharp throughout the entire image. You don't really get any fringing or vignetting, which was actually one of the things I didn't like so much about this 25mm. The vignetting specifically just seemed a little too much, and if you're not going for that artsy look, you're gonna wish this lens didn't have it. Another pro is the focusing on this seemed really smooth, was really easy to do. It's got a very nice smooth focusing ring. The smooth focus ring makes it really easy to change focus between different subjects, similar to other tips I've shared before. Going back and forth between your subjects a couple times helps you kind of develop quick muscle memory as to how far you need to turn between the two locations. And with some practice, you'll get into the routine and it actually works really well. Changing your aperture is actually clicking versus a smooth ring dial. My preference is to actually have the clicking. You of course save a lot being that it's a manual lens without stabilization built in. So those would be cons if you're trying to shoot a similar style to the intro cinematic without a camera like the XH1 with its in-body stabilization for really steady movements. f1.4 is obviously great on it and a improvement over f1.8, but similar to anything really below f2, once you're that precise, I mean, you're really gonna wanna lock it onto a tripod, make sure you have focus assist on your camera, because at f1.4, you need to be crazy precise as far as how you're focusing. Any slight variation will result in dramatic changes as to what is in focus, whether it's the nose or the eye, which again is great if you're trying to be that precise and get that much depth of field, but it's trickier and does take some getting used to. So final thoughts on this, it's a very inexpensive yet well-built lens and produces really great results, but for a limited style of shooting that you need to be aware of. So if you've never had a fixed telephoto lens, you're not going to be able to film, like for example, you can't film this with that, you really have to put it that far away. That Samyang is going to be just looking at maybe like this portion of my face. I set it up just to see what it would look like, and it was not pretty. So if you are planning on using it for more telephoto uses and you understand its limitation, the minimum focusing distance, and kind of the results you'll get out of it, or you plan to do weddings, interviews, and other filming styles that will have a camera locked in place and a slow or non-moving subject, then it's really good because you can get that camera in its right location, get the shot, and you're going to be really happy with the results. Like all manual lenses, they're most convenient and work best for people who are operating behind the camera. But there you go, that was a quick look at the Samyang 85mm, specifically with Fujifilm and from the perspective of a videographer. I like it a lot, and you can check it out with the links down below. Using them does help support the channel, so I appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new. I have some other awesome lens and camera gear reviews coming up that I know you guys will want to check out. And until the next one,